Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish and I'm so glad that we get to spend this time together. I don't think I say it often enough how much I appreciate not only that you are here with me, but that you make comments and suggestions and tell all your friends about it. One more thing to ask, and that is that if you've not already done so, please subscribe. And if you hit that little bell icon, then you will get notification when there's a new video out. So, this is one way to not only bring it to you whenever I have something new, but also the more subscribers and the more little bells there are, then the more often new people will see these videos. And I just really appreciate the help getting the word out because I love what I do and I love to share what I know. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things, but before I forget, the summer vacation cruise, we've been able to extend our deadline to the end of this month, to the end of May, like May 25th, 2022. So if you have not yet registered, there's still time to do that. We have a nice group of people going. Lots of solo stitchers, lots of couples, lots of people coming with friends, coming with friends that stitch, coming with friends that don't stitch. And we're all looking forward to taking classes and having casual stitch time and enjoying the hospitality of celebrity cruise lines who are known for their superb service, their excellent food, their beautiful accommodations. So it's just a win-win all the way around. It's like going on a 7-day floating stitch retreat. So, and if you have never cruised before, I'll put a link in the episode description, but I had an episode that I just talked about cruising in general and can give some tips to, especially for new cruisers. Okay, so that's one thing. Looking at my notes here, there's also a cruise this fall. It's not one that I am organizing, but I'm going to be a teacher on it. And that is sailing from Vancouver. And we're going have 5 sea days to get from Vancouver to the Hawaiian Islands, where we're going to have classes. And I've just added a class to what I'm going to offer. And that's going to be a hands-on workshop to learn about making cording, bows that do not come undone, and to be able to embellish your stitching, and also how to make very, very simple tassels. So I'm adding that to the classes that I'm offering there. But today I really want to talk about the sampler that I am designing and stitching for that summer cruise. And I'm calling it, as you can tell from how the sampler looks, it is going to be 2 turtles and a flamingo. And today I want to use this sampler as a way of demonstrating some just good practices of how to rip out stitching. We all make mistakes, either counting errors or we pick up the wrong color, we stitch it might be a big area and you're talking with friends, you're watching a sporting event or whatever, and the next thing you know, you've kept stitching, and so you might have a couple of rows that need to come out. In this case, although I did a lot of research about sea turtles and learned all kinds of fascinating things about them, like for example, did you know that unlike land turtles, sea turtles cannot retract their head or their flippers, and those what we think of as arms and legs are actually flippers. And what happened while I was designing this, I looked at a lot of photographs from very legitimate sources and to try to get the proportion right of the flippers to the turtle shell. And I felt like I did okay. But after I got the turtle stitched, I felt like the proportion just didn't look right. It may have been scientifically accurate, but design-wise, it just didn't look right. So let me show you what I'm talking about. And sadly, I didn't take photos of this turtle before I started ripping out. So let me show you what we have. Now this is a computer printout rendering rather than a stitched sample of what this looked like. And I actually ended up making a change before I even stitched it. Instead of having this bright blue, I changed it to more of an aqua blue. And at one point, I had the little baby turtle, I had the head and the flippers done in purple. Obviously, this rendering isn't that way. But when I got this big turtle stitched, I felt like that it just didn't look right. So I immediately thought, okay, I've got to rip out. I'm going to have to rip out this entire flipper. And I thought, well, you know what? It's the proportion that's off. So what if I made the shell larger? And so with that in mind, this is what happened. Let me get, whoops, I can actually get the stitched piece out here. So this is what I have stitched at this point. Well, stitched, and as you can see, some parts that are ripped out. So what I decided to do was to rip out the shoulder of the flippers and add a row around the perimeter of the shell, and then I'll just simply restitch this part of the flippers, and the proportion problem will be fixed. Now, in making that change, I also needed to rip out the feet, the little flippers. And also, like I said, at some point I decided to make the head and flippers of the baby turtle in purple. I have since decided to not make it purple and to make it the aqua color also. So this is kind of an opportunity to talk about just some good practices, best practices for ripping out. And I want to start by sharing with you the tools that I use. I use the same needle I've been stitching with, and I use my pair of scissors. Now, and this is, I just cannot emphasize enough that one of the best tools you can have in your sewing basket is a good pair of scissors. Now, this pair retails for maybe about $25. They're not incredibly expensive scissors. These are Gingers. I like the style of them. But the thing that you want to look for when you're shopping for scissors is that the blades should be very narrow and fine this way. And they should also be very narrow in terms of their width. And that's what makes a good pair of embroidery scissors. You don't have to spend $100 or $200 and I'm not exaggerating, $500 for a pair of embroidery scissors. You can get a good pair for $25 or less. And if you shop locally, that's great. And every once in a while you can hit a sale or get a coupon. So this is the tool of our trade. I can do a lot of embroidery with just these two tools. So it makes sense to invest in a good pair. Now, a lot of people, when they rip out, they use a seam ripper. And I am so adamantly opposed to using a seam ripper when you're taking out stitches with needlework. I'm not even going to show you a pair because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding whatsoever. Seam rippers are not compatible with your stitching. Well, actually, that's not really right. Let me say it a different way. You can achieve effective stitch ripping out without using a seam ripper. The danger of using a seam ripper is that you will clip your ground cloth accidentally. And this is not a rare occurrence. It happens way too often. I also do needlepoint. Needlepoint canvas is a lot sturdier than the linen that I stitch on for my counter cross stitch. I don't even use a seam ripper for ripping out needlepoint, and I know a lot of needlepointers do. If I were working on plastic canvas, yeah, I would use one because the seam ripper is not going to damage the plastic canvas. But anything else, it just isn't worth it. So one of the things to talk about here is there's a difference between if I'm ripping out from my earliest stitches down to my latest or backwards. In this case, this was easy to rip out because since the stitches that were down here were the last ones that I did, I could untuck the top leg of that cross stitch and then untuck the one beneath it. And right now I'm using my words instead of showing you, so that's not good. The point I want to make here is you have to get your head wrapped around which direction did you stitch the work in to start with. It also helps to look at the back to remember how you stitched it, especially those of you who don't always stitch in the Danish method. Now remember, the Danish method is one that on the back, your stitches are going to look like this. They're going to be straight up and down. When you stitch in a Victorian method, the stitches won't look like that. They will look like this. And so it helps to remind yourself what style of stitching you're taking out. So, all right, let's just get to it then. So I obviously don't have any more ripping out to do on the big turtle, but what I'm going to do is rip out this purple right here, because I'm going to replace that with an aqua color. And frankly, most of the ripping out I do, I make my counting mistakes, don't get me wrong, but when I'm stitching something new, I am testing the colors as much as I am the designs. And sometimes, like with this little guy, the purple just didn't do it. Let me show you what the chart, this is again a paper rendering of what the chart looks like right now. So this kind of gives you a better idea of how it's all going to come together. So, and also I'm going to add just a little bit of color changes in these slippers as well. So when I restitch it, I'll be able to make that change. All right. So like I say, the first thing I want to do is look at the back and see that, like across here, I can see that I stitched a row in the Victorian method, and most everything else is in the Danish method. So my stitches are straight up and down. Now it also helps to kind of figure out, if you can, where you stopped and started. So before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and release where I have tucked the tail in. And that's just going to make things easier. See, like I thought that was part of the tuck tail, but it wasn't. So I've got that undone. And over here, I mean, you've heard me say this often enough, and that is when you cut off the tail, cut it off dangerously close. The downside of that is sometimes it's kind of hard to see where you buried that thread, but not impossible. So I'm going to rip all that out. All right, so that's going to help. Now, let's just start up here with this row. So when I pull on this, there's no give. So I'm going to loosen it with my needle, slip my scissors under there, and as long as I can see both points, I'm not going to be ripping out the wrong thing. Now, because I did this in the Danish method, I should be able to just go ahead and rip out the top stitches going all the way across here. Well, okay. And every once in a while, if you have a stubborn one, just stop and clip it and go ahead and pull that tuft out. Because I may have just caught it somewhere else. All right, now that was a surprise that it took that whole row out. So I have a feeling that if I came down here, yep. So there's a loose end. Okay, so when I'm ripping out from where I last stitched going toward where I first stitched, it's you're definitely reverse stitching. You're undoing what you've just done. So since you've done the top leg last, then you'll be ripping out the top leg first, and vice versa. Okay, so again, I'm going to flip this over and see where did I go from there. Or if I pull this, I can kind of tell. Okay, so all right, so this is the row that I did as the Victorian method. And when you stitch the Victorian method, you're stitching a stitch at a time. So I'm not taking all the top stitches out and then all the bottom stitches. Instead, I'm taking out complete stitches. And it looks like when I stitched the row above it, I must have caught this thread because it's not giving. Okay. When you rip out, your threads are going to be all curly. And that's what makes it hard to reuse them. I also probably should have prefaced this with saying that one of the things you have to know before you start ripping out is, do you really have to save that thread? Because that's going to make a difference on how you rip it out also. In general, I do not reuse threads unless if I'm only taking out 1 or 2 stitches, and I can do that without compromising the integrity of the thread, then yes, I absolutely rethread my needle and keep on going. But if I'm ripping out a major area like this, I go into it knowing I'm not going to reuse those threads. So carrying on here, yeah, I can tell this is not giving very easily, so I am guessing I must have stitched this row and then stitched this row. And so because I keep coming into this problem, I'm just going to go ahead and take this row out. And this row, I could tell by looking at the back, I did in the Danish method. So taking out the top half of every stitch across, and then taking out the bottom stitch will work. Now I'm going to go ahead and see if I can save this thread so I can give you a tip on what I do when I absolutely have to reuse that thread. And you can see just how absolutely curly it is simply from the length of time it's been in the fabric. Okay, that's being a little stubborn right there. Let me see if I can get that out. Nope. All right, so I'm not gonna tug on that any further right now. But what I want to tell you is if I was ready to reuse this thread to fix my mistake, I would grab my sponge, and again, this is just it's a salad dressing container. Its intended use is for a single serving of salad dressing or something in a lunchbox. And I find that I cut 2 sponges, mainly because it's sort of more narrow at the bottom. And so I cut 1 to fit down in there and then 1 at the top. And this is just dampened with water. And what I do with that curly thread is I dampen it and straighten it out. And now it'll be that much easier to re-stitch with. If you have to use your threads that you are taking out, that's a tip I think you'll be able to use. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and cut that off because I'm not going to need it. Okay, so that took out that row. Whoops, and see, I forgot. I started trying to take out my next top stitch, but this is the Victorian. So I'm taking out complete stitches. Now, as I'm taking this out, you are noticing, I'm sure, that the linen fabric, the holes are definitely showing from where I ripped this out. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to be restitching in exactly the same place that I had stitched before. And don't hesitate to stop and cut your threads off once you get a little length going, because it'll make it easier to rip out the next parts. Okay, now let's see where so again, the back gives me the evidence I need. What I did was I traveled that thread, I buried it under the shell, and then came up here to work the head. So that's a nice clue. That tells me that I must have stitched this from the top of the head down. So again, I can start taking out, whoops, I think I can. No, nope, 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 nope. See, I buried it even further up here. So the opposite, I must have started the neck and worked up, which really makes sense to me, because I tend to not count off into the great blue yonder if I don't need to. And since I already had the shell stitched, I would have started here and worked up. So again, I can start taking these top stitches out. And like I say, after I get a little length, I stop and clip it. And keep going. The other tip I will give you about ripping out is, once you decide you need to rip something out, just do it. You know, if it's going to be a big thing like this, when I was doing the major ripping on the big turtle, I just found a good movie I wanted to watch on my laptop, which is sitting right there by my stitching area, and I brought it up and hit the play button, and just started watching it. And it's just a good way of just, you know, doing something somewhat pleasant while you're doing something that's unpleasant. It's kind of like I listen to audiobooks when I'm washing dishes or doing housework. It makes the time go by so much faster. And of course, now I get to visit with you while I'm doing this ripping out. But I'm not going to subject you to ripping out the second flipper over there. I just want to get this part done. And then I want to talk to you about some of the remedies for kind of the leftovers. When you are done ripping out, then sometimes there are little fuzzies that you need to get rid of. If my stitching mistake was such that I was not going to be restitching this exact same area, then there's some things I would need to do. Okay, now this one's being stubborn, and it ended up coming out, but I bet that's where I did my loop start, and sometimes I just need to flip it over and get it done. All right, I switched to a black background here so that you can really see where the ripping out occurred. And like I say, I'm not concerned with this because I'm going to be restitching in the exact same area. But I'm going to proceed right now as if that's not going to happen. So what can I do? Well, first of all, as you well know, I wash and iron all of my embroideries. And so when I wash this, those linen threads are most likely going to come back to their natural state. But there are some things I can do right now to kind of remedy that. One is that I have just a regular toothbrush, and I can brush over the linen threads, and that kind of helps. Make sure it's clean. This is a brand new out of the package, not a full toothbrush, but just one of those little ones to get in between the gaps. And you can see where this end of it is already looking better. If you wear nail polish, don't do this because you'll end up getting little bits of your nail polish on it, but even your fingernail will help. pair of tweezers can help if you've got a stubborn piece that needs to come out. This is called a snag nabbit, and this is a nice little tool. It comes in a little plastic sort of carrying case, I call it, and it is helpful in terms of tucking a wayward thread back into the back. This is what the packaging looks like. Okay, another thing to use if you've got little bits of thread is just good old cello tape, or, you know, here in the States we call it Scotch tape, which is actually a brand, not a thing. And that will take out little fuzzies. Let's see, what else do I use? I think that's pretty much it. So this kind of gives you some ideas of ways that you can rip out safely, effectively, without damaging your project. I'm just going to try this for a minute here. I really, even just dampening it with your sponge, I just took this out of the case that I had it in, and let me just, yeah, so you can see where, you know, you can't really tell where that stitching has been. So I hope this helps you a little bit. Remember that when you are ripping out, look at the back to see exactly how you execute the stitches to start with, especially if some time has passed. If you are stitching in the order in which you stitched it, then sometimes it's the bottom stitch that you're going to be taking out rather than the top stitch to start with. So if you're tugging on the top and it's not giving, try undoing the bottom leg and see if that works. So these are just a few tips that I just thought I would share with you since I had to rip this out anyway. And like I said, I've got one more flipper to rip out here, and then I need to restitch the baby turtle's head and flippers and finish, doing this, filling in the shoulder area. But I'm really pleased with this design, and I'll show you what the whole thing looks like. I'm still doing a little tweaking, and frankly, until I finish stitching it, tweaking just goes on. But here's a shot of looking at the two turtles really side by side. Whoops, if I can change my camera angle here a little bit. So you can really see where just adding that second row around the turtle's body changed the proportion of the shell to the flippers. And I also think it actually adds a definition to that central motif. So those are the two turtles, and here is the flamingo. And what I've done here is, you can't really tell, but I mean, I know it's there. This design that's kind of in the background, I took from an antique Mexican sampler and then superimposed the flamingo over it. This little guy is a motif from an antique sampler, as are these flowers. This is just something, this dragonfly, I just wanted to put a dragonfly in there. This also came from a Mexican sampler, as did this border and this border and the alphabet style. And basically what I did was I took all these motifs from studying authentic Mexican samplers, and I put them together in the sampler, and then I washed the whole thing with a very tropical color scheme. Our itinerary is really Western Caribbean. We're going to Cozumel, we're going to Key West, we're going to Belize City, we're going one more place, can't remember what it is. Anyway, and we'll have 2 sea days. And so we're going to have classes on this cruise. So anyway, yeah, so I just kind of thought about all those places that we're going to go and put it together. And this will be a sampler that every stitcher who is registered with us to go on this cruise will get the chart and the fabric and all the floss to make themselves a souvenir. Oh, and the other thing that I'm doing, and this is something I have not done before, or haven't done very much, where it says beach time on this, I'm also charting out Key West, Florida, sun fun, pool time, just as many different things as I can think of to kind of go along with this theme. And then that way, once the cruise is over and I've published it for general use, I'm hoping it's going to appeal to a lot of people with, you know, different things on here. Okay, so that's all there is about that, I think. It's a good thing I looked at my notes, because there is one more thing. And I'll need to see, of course, that part right there is still damp, so I don't want to mess with that. But down here where the little baby turtle's flippers were, let's see if we can come in. Yeah, I think you kind of still see where the fabric was dislodged. This is the other tool I use, a white eraser. Now, my friends across the pond will call this a rubber rather than an eraser. White, not pink. And you can use this to kind of go over the fabric, and that will also kind of put the threads back where they belong. So that is another tool that I often use. All right, now I really do think that's it. We are having the craziest weather here in the South. I think that Mother Nature decided that we would have a true spring for about 6 weeks, and that is sunny skies, warmer temperatures, still cool enough for a sweater or a light jacket, certainly not winter clothes and not really summer clothes. That's how I define spring. So I feel like that Mother Nature has decided, okay, we're going to give you all, actually we would say y'all, we're going to give y'all 6 weeks of spring here in the South, but I'm going to give them to you 2 or 3 days at a time. So we have 2 or 3 days of this very typical spring-like weather, and then it's 80 degrees and you're into summer. And then we have a few days of spring, and then we have winter again, and then we have summer again. And so it's been absolutely crazy. But when the sun starts shining, it reminds me to remind you, this is my PSA, for those of you who use magnifiers, please, 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 please cover them with something. A pillowcase, a piece of fabric, something that you need to cover them when you are not using it. And I'm serious. If you get up to go make yourself a glass of iced tea or a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or to let the dog out, cover your magnifier. A fire can start in as little as 10 or 15 minutes. It doesn't take long. So we all like to sit, you know, by a window with nice natural light, and then you've got your magnifier, and that is just asking for a little bit of a flame. So I have seen evidence of needlework being burned, of the arms of chairs being burned, of a chart pack or the chart that a person's working with being burned in as little as 10 or 15 minutes. So please, 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 please use something to cover that magnifier. And with that in mind, I hope that wherever you are stitching happy, staying safe, and I'll see you next time.